Hi there, my name is Katie and welcome to this presentation on IQ and Aptitude Tests. Now during this presentation I'm going to teach you how to better your performance in any IQ assessment. Okay, so before we get into the different types of questions, let's ask ourselves why. Why do people have to take IQ tests? Why are they becoming a popular assessment for initial selection processes? Well, to answer these questions, we need to first look at what IQ and aptitude tests are. Okay, so the word IQ refers to intelligence quotient. The word aptitude refers to how well and how quickly a person is able to learn and demonstrate their knowledge and ability. Therefore, an IQ and aptitude test is foremost a test designed to measure trait intelligence and cognitive ability indicated by your efficiency in processing information. Now, what this means is that your level of intellectual ability is assessed and analysed to determine how well you are suitable for the job that you are applying for. So employers need to ensure themselves with able candidates who possess the correct intelligence and skills in order to complete their job competently, which is why they often use IQ and aptitude tests. Right, I suggest whilst watching this video you have with you a pen and a blank piece of paper and take some notes throughout this presentation. There are some good tips and guidance that I will share with you in this presentation which you can then use to help you prepare for your IQ and aptitude assessment. Okay, so now that we have a clearer understanding of what IQ and aptitude tests are, we should now focus on the types of questions you can expect during an IQ assessment. So the types of questions that you are likely to face in an IQ and aptitude assessment are as follows. So we have mental arithmetics, ratios, fractions, number sequences, spatial aptitude, grammar and punctuation, general verbal aptitude tests, and abstract and diagrammatic reasoning. So depending on the type of job that you've applied for will depend on the types of questions that you will be asked. So I would advise that you find out before undergoing practice questions in order to understand what you should practice the most on. Okay, so before we tackle some sample questions, you'll want to know some of the key tips on how to improve your IQ performance. Now, whilst IQ and aptitude tests are designed to test your intellectual ability, you are able to practice for them, which means in turn you are able to increase your scores. So that means the only way to improve your IQ is to undergo plenty of sample questions over a prolonged period of time. The more questions and question types that you practice, the better chance you have at scoring highly on your assessment. So after you have finished watching this presentation, be sure to check out our How to Become guide on IQ and aptitude tests, which will provide you with hundreds of sample questions in a variety of different testing areas. Now, as I have stated before, you should try to find out what type of aptitude test you are going to be sitting. So this will help you narrow down and focus your preparation on the areas which you know are going to be tested. So if you do wish to greatly improve your IQ prior to your assessment, then we recommend that you practice different types of questions in order to better your overall performance. So there is nothing wrong with undergoing more in-depth preparation. It will give you more of an advantage to ensure that you know how to answer each type of question. Finally, another key point which you should take note of is to aim for both speed as well as accuracy. Now, employers often use these tests as a way of measuring a candidate's ability to perform under pressure, hence why these tests are usually conducted under timed conditions. Therefore, without sacrificing accuracy, you want to work swiftly through the questions. Also, another note to take on board is that you will want to find out whether the test you are sitting will deduct marks for any incorrect answers. So you do not want to guess answers if you will lose marks for answers that are wrong. So if you know that your assessment won't deduct marks, there is nothing wrong with taking an educated guess. Okay, so now that we have these tips tucked under our belts, let's move on and practice some sample IQ questions. So the first type of question, as mentioned before, is mental arithmetic. Now, mental arithmetic questions can be tricky if you do not know the basic arithmetic formulas. You will be expected to have a basic understanding, including multiplication, division, percentages, and so forth. So if it has been a long time since you have undergone mental arithmetics, make sure that you brush up on your knowledge and practice these intensely. These types of questions often crop up in numerous psychometric tests, so therefore you should ensure the best that you possibly can. So let's take a look at the example question here. So the question asks, what is 58% of 700 divided by 7? So a key tip that you should focus on is to work out one part of the arithmetic first, i.e. the 58% of 700, and then go back and do the divide by 7. Okay, so let's do it step by step. So here we have 700 divided by 100 times by 58, because this is the percentage that you are trying to work out. So if you use a calculator to ensure that it was correct, you would know that it is 406. So this is the first part of the process complete. So you've now worked out 58% of 700, which is 406. Now you need to divide this by 7, as it says here. So this will require long division. So how many 7s go into 4? So you would start off by this bit here. So you would know that you can't get any 7s to go into 4. So you'd put a 0. So then move on, and how many 7s go into 40? So you would use these two numbers here. So that would be 5, and you'd have a remainder of 5. So you would use the remainder and put it on top of the line for your long division. So then you would have how many 7s go into 56, because you've just been left with a 5 previously, and you're left with the 6 still here that you're yet to complete. So how many 7s go into 56, which would be 8. So therefore the correct answer would be 58, because you would have put the 5 on top of the line and then put the 8 next to it in order to give 58. So for any type of mental arithmetic test, you will be expected to have a solid understanding of dividing and multiplying. So practice as much as you can with these types of questions, and they will become easier the more that you practice. Okay, so let's take another example. So here we have multiply 21 by 3 and subtract it from 108 multiplied by 2 minus 27. Now that's a lot to take on board. So remember that our key tip, as shown before, which is to break it up to ensure that, to ensure that you know how to work out each stage to ensure that the answer is correct. So let's take 21 multiplied by 3, which would give you 63. So that's that part of the equation done. So then you would have 108 times by 2. So you're working out this part here. So 108 multiplied by 2 is 216, which you then have to minus 27, as it says so there, which would give you 189. So you know that you have to subtract the 189 that you've just got from the answer that you previously worked out from the first part of the equation, which was that bit there. So 189 minus 63 is 126, which is the correct answer. Okay, so that's pretty self-explanatory, and the more that you practice, the more quicker you will become at undergoing these types of questions. Okay, so let's move on to some fractions. So this type of fraction is requiring you to add 1/3 plus 1/2. So if you use what is known as the crossbow method, so here it shows you, quite self-explanatory really, of how to undergo fractions. Now this method is a useful way to undergo any type of fraction. So first we know we have to draw a cross in between these, so that there to that there. So you have to multiply the 1 by the 2 and the 3 by the 1, and this would form the top part of your fraction. Okay, so the next part is you have to do a bow. So the bow would go underneath these bottom two fractions here, and again you would have to multiply these two numbers in order to give you 6. So you would have had 3 plus 2, because you would have done 1 times 2 equals 2, and 3 times 1 equals 3. So the answer would be 5/6. So when working through these fractions and using these methods, it is probably best to draw in the lines as shown here, because it's a useful way to see what numbers you are multiplying together. So, and you can use this method if you are required to subtract fractions. So if this was 1/3 minus 1/2, this would be exactly the same, apart from on the top of the fraction line, it would be a minus instead of a plus. But overall, the method is exactly the same. So, okay, so let's move on to another type of question. So this still uses fractions, and it's called the arrow method, and the arrow method is used to multiply fractions, and this is really easy. So as you can see here, we've got 2/3 times by 3/4. So we've drawn in the two arrows, so this arrow goes straight through the two top numbers there, and this arrow goes through the two bottom numbers there. So 2 times 3 would give you 6, and 3 times 4 would give you 12. So you would be left with 6/12. Okay, so we can then work out how to divide fractions by using the exact same method, only with the second fraction, if you turn that upside down and replace the divide sign by a multiply sign, you'll be able to work out these questions exactly as this. So 2/3 divided by 4/5, so you know that you have to turn this fraction upside down, which would give you 5/4, and then you would just use the same process as up here, so and then multiply the two numbers on the top, so 2 times 5 equals 10, and 3 times 4 equals 12, so that would give you 10/12, or if you wanted to simplify that fraction, you could get 5/6. So that pretty much self-explains fractions, and it's a much simpler way to undergo fraction questions, and I know the more that you practice, the easier they will become, and if you use these methods correctly, then there is no doubt that you can undergo any type of fraction question. So let's move on to a different type of question, and these are ratios. So the question here says Sam has 80p, Robert has £1.20. What is the ratio of Sam's money to Robert's money in its simplest form? Okay, so here we are working in pence, and here we're working in pounds and pence. So it makes it quite hard to simplify this. So the best way to work out this question is to convert one of these into the same, so that you're working with both the same currency. So if we change £1.20, which would be 120p, you would have 80p and 120p, which makes it easier to find out the ratio and simplify it down. Okay, so let's step 1. So we have the 80p here, as you can see, and we've just changed that from £1.20 to 120p. So in order to simplify it, so we need to find two numbers that go into this in order to put it into its simplest form. So if you divide both of these numbers by 2, so you can start this off with any numbers that you are given. So if they can be divided by 2, then do so. So 80 divided by 2 would give you 40, and 120 divided by 2 would give you 60. So you are left with a new ratio. So let's work with this and divide it by 2 again. So 40 divided by 2 would give you 20, 60 divided by 2 would give you 30. So use the same method again. 20 divided by 2 would give you 10, and 30 divided by 2 would give you 15. Now you can't divide by 2 anymore because 2 won't go into 15, so you would then use the next odd number, which is 3, but then 3 doesn't go into 10, so then use the next odd number, which is 5. So as you can see, 5 can go into 10 2 times, and 5 can go into 15 3 times. So after 4 small steps, we can see that 80 over 120 is the same, or the simplest form is 2 over 3. So therefore the correct answer is 2 over 3. So that's a relatively simple question, and as long as you convert the same numbers, so you're working in the same thing, then you'll be able to simplify these numbers down, as long as you know to start off by dividing by 2, and then when you can no longer divide by 2, then go to the next odd number, and then try the next odd number, and so forth until you can no longer simplify it down. Okay, so let's move on to a different type of IQ and aptitude test, which is number sequences. Now these these questions can be quite hard if you can't visualize what's going on in the pattern. So the question asks you to look carefully for the pattern and then choose which pair of numbers comes next. So here we've got the pattern of 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, 15, 17. So this question is pretty simple, and if you should be able to realise fairly quickly what's happening in this sequence. So top tips to include that you should think about when answering these types of questions is to work out the relationship between all the numbers and find the pattern amongst the sequence. Now, depending on the level of difficulty of the number sequence will depend on whether there's just one sequence happening or if there's multiple, because this sequence here is quite simple, and you should see that the sequence is going up by 2 each time. So 5 plus 2 is 7, 7 plus 2 equals 9, and so forth. So 17 plus 2 would give you 19, which would be the next number. And so if 19 was there, plus 2 would give you 21. So the next two numbers in this sequence would be 19 and 21. However, if this was a more complicated sequence, there may be two different number sequences going on. So that could be plus 2, plus 3, plus 2, plus 3. So that's two different sequences that you need to look out for. So just make sure that you pay attention to how the numbers are linked to each other and how the sequence is progressing. Okay, so let's try some different types of IQ and aptitude questions, and these are spatial aptitude questions. So these types of questions always include shapes, and the question here is asking which is the missing square. So as you can see, this question mark here is showing you what square you need to find. So top tips is for these types of questions is to eliminate the most obscure answers. So let's work from this row here. So there's a black square top right corner, black square bottom right corner, then black square bottom left corner. So you can see, you should notice that these squares are moving to the corners in a clockwise motion. So from this square to this square, you can see that it still follows the same pattern, because that square there would become that square there. It's moved one corner clockwise. So this is what the entire sequence is how it's progressing. So you should know that the next answer should be answer B, because you know that black square moves one corner clockwise, so it will go there. So different things can happen in these types of sequences, so you need to pay attention to everything. So in this case, it's the rotation of the squares moving around the larger squares. So just be sure to pay attention to what's happening and how the shapes throughout the sequence are connected, and they will be connected in some way, whether that's symmetry or rotations, reflections. So just pay attention to those type of things, and you should be fine in answering these types of questions. So let's move on to different IQ and aptitude tests. So this consists of grammar. So this question asks you to insert the 4 words below into their correct positions within the text. So here you have a passage, and here we have 4 different words. So you need to find where each of these words will be placed in the text. So a good way to understand where each of these words to go will be to read out the passage out loud with one of the words and see whether it makes sense. So let's choose the first word here, collisions. So let's try and place it into there. So if we read the sentence, firefighters are people whose collisions job, well, that just doesn't make sense. So we know that word can't go there. So let's try it in this space here. They are often called to car collisions when people need to be cut out. So that does make sense. So we could assume that word there can be placed in that space there. So let's take the next word, provides. Again, use the first empty space here. So firefighters are people whose provides job. So again, that doesn't make sense. So let's use the next space here. So they are called to provides buildings. So again, that doesn't make sense. So let's use the last space. The firefighter service provides a rescue service. So you know that that word has to go there because it's the only one that makes sense. Okay, so let's use the word collapsed. So firefighters are people whose collapsed jobs, well, that doesn't make sense. So they are called to collapsed buildings. So that does make sense. So we can place that word there. So finally, let's double check that this word fits into this only space here. Firefighters are people whose primary job it is to put out fires. So yes, that does make sense. So that's quite a relatively simple question, and as long as you know what the meanings of words are, there is no doubt that you'll be able to understand where the different words will go in the passage. Okay, so let's move on to a different type of question. So we've got general verbal, and the question asks you which word does not have a similar meaning to imaginary. So this requires you to understand the meanings of different words. So it will be best if you brush up on your vocabulary, and you need to have a strong understanding of what words mean in order to answer this type of question. So here we've got apocryphal, fictional, elusive, inconsistent. So if you have a good vocabulary, you should know that the word that does not have a similar meaning to imaginary would be D, inconsistent, because imaginary is obviously something that's fictional or is imagined, which these three words here are all synonyms of imaginary. So just remember to brush up on your vocabulary if you are sitting an IQ and aptitude test that requires you to use general verbal reasoning. Okay, so that sums up the sample questions of this presentation, and you can download practice hundreds of different sample questions now and improve your IQ scores by going onto our How to Become website and getting a copy of our IQ and aptitude test book, and it contains lots of different sample questions as we've previously seen throughout this presentation, and you can enhance your performance by undergoing as many practice questions as possible. So all that's left for me to do is to say thank you very much for watching, and I hope you successfully pass any of your IQ and aptitude tests.